All right, guys, welcome back to the ALG podcast. Today we have a very special episode for you guys. Today we are not joined by one guest, but two guests, two returning guests. Today we have Instagram's most wanted man, the artist formerly known as Gormy _goes_ keto, now known as one word, Gormy goes keto, and the big homie, Ben PrimalBro Phelps. And of course, as always, join with me is my partner in crime, David Fit D Rock Roden. And
Yow.
I'm John Arpino. And welcome to the show. Today, guys, we are going on a path, a journey, if you will. We are going to have a roundtable discussion on everybody's favorite diet, it looks like, keto. So I figured, me and David figured, if we're going to talk about keto, we got to talk to, in our opinion, two of the biggest keto role models on the Grizzam. So here we go. We got two of them.
Not so big anymore.
Well, yeah, not so big.
And I'm back.
Anymore.
I missed that intro, but I'm back.
Oh, it was
Perfect.
a beautiful intro. You'll listen to it, when
immaculate.
this comes out. Yeah, it was a great intro.
And then for anyone listening right now, I'll cut this out. I'm not kidding. Yes, I'm getting savage comments for not cutting out error spots. I'm sorry. We're working on it here. We're working on it.
We are. We really are.
Perfection's a myth, people. I love it. No, I'm looking forward to this conversation because, number one, it's fun with Primal because he's actually eating some potatoes and some rice for the first time in a while. So it's going to be fun to have this conversation. And obviously Gormy is still holding strong with because Gormy, you're still locked in keto. You don't cheat at all, quote unquote cheat.
Well, what day of the week is it?
What day of the week is it?
No, I mean, I'm a keto 99% of the time.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't had any. I don't think since I've been in California, I can say I haven't had a potato since I've gotten to California.
Yeah,
I was waiting to pull that out and throw it at Ben as like an accusation, like this was like a moderated debate. I was going to be like, "And you, sir, had a sweet potato on your plate," like in the middle of an argument. Like I wanted to like.
Just the idea of I'm looking forward to, obviously the internet's being a little goofy right now. It's called life, and I'm excited to have some of the what is keto exactly. I think that's a good place to start. Yeah. And then going into the how to, and then kind of going into misconceptions on both sides. Like obviously I think having the discussion of seeing some girl that's keto eating a hot dog wrapped in pizza cheese and going, "I'm keto." And I'm like, "You're crazy." And having the pros and cons of keto conversation, and then like keto hacks, I think is a kind of good place to talk to finish it off with. Yeah. And then there's a couple of questions on our Discord server that we'll finish up at the end.
Yeah, we'll rapid fire those if you want at the end.
Yeah.
So before we really get into the meat and not potatoes, I do have not a question, but first of all, tell us, Gormy, you go first. How long have you been on keto?
For me, we're coming up on almost 4 years. February will be 4 years, so 3 years and 9 months.
Cool. Yeah. No, we have voice now. So Ben, really quick, how long have you been on keto?
So almost identical, right about the 4-year mark, because like Gormy was saying, I heard him talking that we had started at roughly similar times. We've kind of been on rode this train together, so to speak.
Cool. Awesome. So that's good because, then maybe because you guys have been on it for just about the same time, you guys maybe will have some of the same experiences. Maybe. So Gormy, we'll start off with you. What made you lean towards the keto path? Obviously we know your story. We know, you've done every diet in the book, but what made you lean towards that?
Well, I think honestly it was realizing that any success I had in the past was when I was going lower carb. I have been reading about the ketogenic diet. I read specifically 2 books, Jimmy Moore's Keto Clarity and Vinnie Tortorich's Fitness Confidential. And both talked about using a well-formulated ketogenic diet to give people relief from food addiction and from cravings. And that was always the challenge for me. Even when I was successful on paleo in 2012, 2013, I was still white knuckling all the time. And I was looking for something that might give me relief from that hormonal roller coaster of food. And so I was drawn to keto because I felt like that was something that would help me and with everything that I was dealing with from what I was reading really at the time. It wasn't necessarily I had tried it before or anything along those lines. It was more, and there really weren't that many people kind of practicing it in the social media space as of that time. Like it was more just starting to get bigger. So it was really about kind of diving in and seeing how it worked for me.
I got you. Well, Ben, I just texted Ben on the side. I told him to hop off and then hop back on in. What were some of the things? Because like to me, keto kind of always attracted me because of I'm a cheese guy. You know, I've always been a cheese guy. I've always been a meat guy. Was that there? We go, Ben. You are crystal. Don't do anything. You're beautiful.
Don't do
guys.
anything.
Ben is here. Ben is here.
I made it. I'm not late, I guess.
No, not at all. Okay, Gormy, really quick. What was like some of the things that attracted you towards the keto diet?
I think it's having that savory, knowing that I could eat those savory foods, being able to kind of pull that into place. I think for me too, I knew I had a problem with sweet things. And I knew I had a problem with sugar, controlling it, like the massive amounts of sugar I could eat without restriction. So I knew I needed to do something that would restrict that. And for me, I'm the kind of person that rules help me. That idea of just kind of free balling in that if it fits your macros world is something that just doesn't work well for me, because I will try, like I've said this before, when I was a teenager and I did Weight Watchers, I figured out how to eat chicken breast and Reese's peanut butter cups for all my points on Weight Watchers. Yep. So I find ways to make things happen. So I knew that if I was just doing strict calorie tracking, I would find ways to use those calories in ways that were not going to, help me at all with the challenges I was having. And honestly, it was this idea of eating a higher fat diet, giving me relief from that constant hunger, was just something that was too attractive for me not to try. And I love the savory food. Like I love all food, that's my problem. So it's not like, there's some people that are like, they have a sweet tooth, they have a savory tooth, they like salty, give it to me, I'll take it. The thing I'm probably most upset about in the world is I see now that they're pre-packaging cheddar, salt, and caramel popcorn together in one bag for people. I
saw that.
So you can have it all at one time. That never existed when I was on that stuff. So, that's really my sphere, is like I would go from a savory meal to dessert, back to a savory meal, back to another dessert. And it was this endless train. And so the idea that by focusing on some of those more savory components might help me get off that train was something really attractive to me.
Cool.
Yeah, so because the big thing to me is like, for anyone that's just hearing keto, like for the first time, obviously, well, actually anyone clicking this, it's not the first time, but like the thumbnail sketch, I'll just portray to anyone that's wondering this whole, because I think there's two main angles to it. Number one is carb restriction. Like that's number one. Like there's no way to get on ketosis without carb restriction, meaning below 30 to 40 carbs, and I would say total carbs, not even net carbs, a day. And then number two is the distinguishing factor of, are you on a 70 to 80% fat diet of your calories being fat? Because for me, I've always liked low carb, but when I go to high fat, which is, I would say, keto versus a low carb diet, I just have a hard time with all that fat personally. I like a high protein, low carb, mid fat than a high fat, mid protein, low carb. Personally.
Well, I think as far as getting into ketosis, like it depends on your body, but really it's the carb restriction that matters the most. There are some people that eat more in the 50% fat range and are still show high readings of levels of ketosis. Like it really depends on you as a person. Like I have some clients that I work with that are in the, I have one client specifically who's in the 50 total carb range right now for himself. And, he's in ketosis. Like I think there are some people, it's when you're coming down under 100, depending on their insulin sensitivity and how they react to carbs, like they can be eating more than others. Then there are other people who, to see any kind of measurable reading of ketones in their blood, need to take their carbs down even lower. But really, I think the big thing that people miss with keto is it's not a brand of food. It's not like anything along those lines. It's a metabolic state. Keto is a metabolic state. And I think then what we get into, which is something you kind of hinted at, that I'm sure Ben and I both can speak to at some point during this, is food choice then starts to come into play, but it's the kind of thing, like you could lose weight on any diet if you do the diet, if you follow the diet's rules. You could be keto and eat junk food all day. Like, are you going to be healthy? That's a whole nother discussion. Like, are you actually going to be, metabolically functioning? Are you going to feel great? All of those things. But could you be quote unquote in keto and just eating crap? Of course you could be.
and you can be in ketosis and gain weight. It's
Right.
like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not, they're not, they don't correlate, right? They're independent of one another too. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I'm looking forward to like when we start, because obviously Ben here did keto for pretty much 3-4 straight years, and then you're at the first time ever adding some friggin' potatoes and some rice back to your meals. And how has that kind of transition been for you?
it has been a bigger mental shift over the last couple of weeks more than anything. And I'm nervous about it because, like Gormy, it's like I'm never going to be the person that can, if it fits your macros to a point of like eating a donut every day and making that work. If I'm going to eat a donut, I'm going to eat 12 donuts. So I just don't eat donuts, right? I operate better in that realm. But the first thing that ever really worked for me was paleo. And I ate tons of honey and sweet potatoes and fruit. And I still fairly effortlessly lost weight. It was only once life got more difficult, I fell off that diet. So then I came back to it. And that's when I started keto, right? We've talked about my story on the podcast. But yeah, I rode keto for like about 4 years. And to say I'm reintroduced carbs is a stretch, right? It is rice and sweet potatoes almost exclusively. Probably honestly more the sweet potatoes than the rice, because something I've found is that my baseline is a little bit different. So like, I don't necessarily feel as good when I'm eating the rice. The sweet potatoes feel like they burn cleaner. And that's going to be, again, something that's different for everyone. But it's kind of, I had to get super duper restrictive and specific in order to reset and fix ideally or hopefully everything. And now I'll just try to build upon that and see how far I can take it. Like I said, I'm never going to be the person who posts these epic cheat meal videos or anything like that. That'll never work for me. But what might work for me is some potatoes, because I don't need to be afraid of Matt Vincent. We talked about him earlier, the hate brand, Gormy's hat. He had a quote on a podcast that he said, I've seen a bunch of episodes of My 600-Pound Life, and they've never carved anyone out of a house surrounded by banana peels. And that's true, right? It's not the most keto friendly food, right? But it's not the problem for America, or for people. Like Gormy was saying, keto is more of an individualized, you have more of a personal or specific reason for doing it.
Right. But I'd also say, like, I do think it's important, like, because I've heard Matt say that like 100 times, and on some levels I agree with it, and on some levels I disagree, because I think for some of us eating, and I think a lot of people in the keto sphere have kind of gone into that place of experimenting with sweet potatoes and rice and workout targeted carbs and things along those lines. And I've just run across a lot of people that started in that place of reintroducing sweet potatoes, and it ends up becoming a gateway for them. It ends up becoming something where it brings those cravings back. It brings back the carb cravings. So I think there's something to be said that there are some of us that, if we started out surrounding ourselves with banana peels, would end up in a bad place. And there are some people that it wouldn't. Like, I think it really is. But like Ben's saying, like, it's very individual. Like, I think sometimes what happens is we get too caught up in worrying about what someone else is doing, and how is that experiment going for that person, and we don't experiment enough on ourselves. Like, I think we don't. Like, there's some people that look at keto and see it as being this like incredibly restrictive way of eating, where like I look at keto as being something that's very freeing to me. Like, it's actually created a freedom for me when it comes to food. And I think then it just goes back into perspective. And I think I look at like what Ben's doing, and I see his perspective on trying that. And then I've seen some other people that are having potato because they really want potato. They're not actually doing it from this perspective of trying to see how their bodies respond and being mindful about it. And when you're going into it just because you want to try it because someone else tried it and you feel like that gives you permission to do it, is when you find yourself in trouble. And so like, I think that one of the things that, for me, I find, like, I hear from a lot of people is like, do you do this? Do you, have you tried reintroducing these things? Have you tried that? And I'm like, when I do that, I get in trouble, and it's okay to be one of those people that does that. Like, it's okay for it to work for you, and it's okay for it not to work for you. And I think the other thing, like, realize that, someone like Ben, or someone like, some of our friends that have started using like workout targeted carbs, or having certain days where they have sweet potatoes or they have rice, they're not getting, like Ben said, they're not getting a dozen donuts. They're not having donuts and, Cocoa Krispies and things along those lines. Like, they're not putting themselves back in that chain and causing, getting back into those habits. Like, so it becomes this really different thing, very kind of bio-individual. The same thing with carb level and net carbs versus total carbs. That's a whole nother debate in terms of like what works better for people, and like, how do you respond better and what works best for you. Like, I did I did keto one way for a year and a half, for over a year and a half, and I lost a ton of weight. I went from 480 to 290, eating just 25 grams of net carbs a day and not counting a gram of fat or protein. So there were probably days where I didn't have a high fat day.
Right.
And then I ended up doing it differently and counting total carbs and really tracking, getting that fat percentage up, and found a completely different world. And I think having that willingness to adapt and grow and realize that there isn't one way to do keto is also the big thing. If you Google how to do keto, there's a million answers on Google.
Right.
And the hard part is figuring out which one works for you, but you have to be willing to do the work and find what works. The same way with any other diet, with the if it fits your macros people, I don't fault them if that's something that they do that they find success with. I think the people that are truly successful with it are not the ones that are using their macros to eat Oreos all day, and then having some chicken breasts. They're the people that find ways to work those things in, realizing that treat foods are treat foods. The same thing with keto treats. That's a whole nother can of worms. But there's a company now that makes keto Pop-Tarts. Keto Pop-Tarts should not be an everyday food for anyone.
Right.
Pop-Tarts are not an everyday food. They're a treat
who
food.
makes that?
Legendary Foods.
I've had. Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, creators of the crack nut butters that taste like pie. That are nearly impossible to control yourself when you open a jar.
Yes.
But I think what happens is we fall into this place of people want to replicate the foods that they have trouble controlling when they go keto, and they want the keto substitutes. And I think it's foolish to think that if I could regulate pizza naturally, that I can somehow all of a sudden regulate it because it's on cauliflower. There's still that psychological
absolutely.
mindset side of things with food that I
I've
think people don't realize.
I've talked about it on my podcast before. It's even if I don't care if the brownies are keto or not, eating an entire tray of brownies is never the right. It's never a good idea,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. It's this idea of or even the pints of keto ice cream, the ones Halo Top Keto and Enlightened Keto tend to be the lower calorie ones versus Rebel or Killer Whey. And there are people who are there's so few calories in this, I can eat the whole pint. And I'm the issue isn't whether or not you can eat a whole pint of ice cream. It's that you want to eat a whole pint of ice cream.
Of course.
That's what you really need to work on. You need to work on realizing that ice cream is a portion food. We're so into this idea of what we deserve and how we should be able to indulge and all of that. And I'm not saying I don't. I mean, I ate a pint of Rebel ice cream the other night, but I'm also very realistic that was it good for me to eat a pint of Rebel ice cream? No, it wasn't. That was not smart. It was a choice I made. And I think we move further away and we give ourselves permission because something has that keto label on it. And that, again, I feel like I keep bringing up all these topics. We could talk about the fact that when something says keto certified, it's got nothing to do with the ketogenic diet. It's got to do with the fact that product paid to have that stamp put on their label. Mm-hmm. There is no FDA regulation on whether a product qualifies as a ketogenic food. There's nothing like that at all out there. Because really any food could be ketogenic, depending on the amount you're eating it in.
The context of the rest of your day,
Yeah, and I think that's always a big misconception for me. And John and I are in the same position where it's the anti-diet and being so careful. So you want to go to keto, which is great. If you want to take that route, you want to build some more accountability on the carbs you're eating, on the sugar, all this kind of stuff. Great. It does not mean you're allowed to cheat the system. And it's for example, it's okay, so you play the game of, oh, well, the net carbs of almond butter is so low, I'm going to eat a whole freaking jar. And it's well, my total net carbs is only 38 today. Well, you ate 8,000 calories. Right. This whole idea of
calories don't count on keto. Yeah.
Yeah. It's calories don't count on keto. And I think it's important to have the discussion of what is the outcome? What when you're creating a nutritional plan, what is the goal? And the balance between fat loss and weight loss to get to an ideal body weight, and then what is actually healthy. And you sit here and you get in this position of, I mean, you see this across my TikTok, and it was a girl freaking out and so happy about eating this big old thick just synthetic hot dog, and she took a pizza and she rolled the cheese off of the pizza, leaving the bread behind, and ate it. And she's oh my God, I love how I can eat stuff like this and still be healthy. And I'm we need to have a little conversation here, because it's not necessarily about that, but it's how much are you doing it?
Right.
Is this a crutch to find? Because again, you can go to the same thing with vegans, because it's guess what? Oreos are vegan. Doesn't mean they're healthy. And so it is having that kind of discussion with keto is this all size fits none kind of perspective, where it's like, well, as long as my carbs are low and my fat's high, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And having that conversation, I think that's what nutritionists get so bad about, because they're like, we need to pump the brakes here. Pump the brakes. Let's talk about what is the metabolic position and what's the importance of it. Because I think flipping the coin too, the amount of nutritionists that like have such a negative connotation to keto is fascinating. Right. Because the funniest part to me is, you go to any bariatric surgeon, what is the first thing that a bariatric surgeon, almost every single one of them does? They put you on a low carb diet.
Yeah, low carb.
Right.
Low carb diet.
Before the liquid, yeah.
But I mean, let's be realistic. Like, and I don't want to. This is going to make some people hate me, but honestly, I think 99% of nutritionists out there are full of crap. Like,
Sunshine.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of. I know most dietitians. I'm not trying to screw up terms. Most nutritionists are going to tell people with type 2 diabetes that they should be eating bread and candy and cookies because you can't restrict yourself. And I have a friend who constantly is going to his endocrinologist and getting his insulin increased. And when he goes and meets with his dietitian and his nutritional therapist, and the dietitian says, well, I see you're not eating as much bread as you used to be. Don't you feel restricted? You should be eating more bread. And I'm literally like, this person is trying to kill you. This person is literally going to kill you. When you're type 2 diabetic, medication is not healing you. Right. Medication is slowing the progression of your disease. Your disease is still there. And you can change your disease by changing what you eat. And it's this idea that it's because as people, we're not willing to make changes. Like, we're willing to take pills for the rest of our lives, but we're not willing to say, I shouldn't eat candy for the rest of my life.
Well, it's easy to throw a Band-Aid on it,
Right. But it's for some reason, if I suggest to you that eating candy, removing candy from your diet for the rest of your life could save you, I'm insane. But if a doctor tells you to take 5 medicines for the rest of your life every day, that will slow the progression of your disease, you're still going to lose a foot. Yeah. That's reasonable.
And absolutely.
Like there's food is powerful. Like, food is really powerful. And I think we get lost in this idea. Like, and I don't fault doctors, because like we've all probably talked about this at some point. Like, doctors get a month on nutrition when they're in medical school. And then they're all, especially general practitioners, have to learn how to handle 1 million different ailments, 1 million different symptoms, 100%. And have all that information in their heads. And then, so they refer, like, my doctor doesn't refer any of his patients to the dietitian in his practice, because he knows the information that person is going to give them is faulty. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, find, like you were starting to say, David, like, when someone is people can take any form or way of eating and manipulate it so they can kind of have the crap food that they want to eat. Like, we talk about nutrition quality. Like, it's one of the things that we work on, I work on with my clients. It's not just getting yourself into like your keto macros, but also talking about what are your food choices? What are the types of oils you're eating? Like, what are the different ingredients and how they're affecting you? And then also all the other factors that come into a person's life. And at the end of the day, it's just, we get trapped in this place of feeling like restriction is bad and making the choice not to have something is bad. And you can't do that for the rest of your life. And like, my response is always, why couldn't you? Why can't you do that? If that's saving you, I was undiagnosed type 2 diabetic. There was, I have all this, I still have pain in my feet every day because of neuropathy that is healing. But someone wants me to just take medicine and allow me to kind of eat foods that would still cause that problem to persist, instead of living the restricted lifestyle that I'm living now. Like, I get so angry when I think about this fact that as much as we're all adults, we act like babies when it comes to food. It's like, well, I can't have that anymore. And so that makes my life horrible. And I'm a bit, and you're suggesting to me that I can't eat that makes you a bad person. It's like, no, grow up. Take charge of what's on your plate. Like, and if taking charge of what's on your plate means you just do portion control, calorie restriction, and that works for you, I think that's fantastic. There's some common influencers out there that we all know. One specifically who lives out here in San Diego with me, who loves to talk about keto, not being the best thing. And half the time he's doing it is joking, and people don't catch on to it. Oh yeah. But it's this idea of realizing that if keto gives someone freedom from problems they've been having and helps someone with food addiction, or helps someone deal with other challenges, or cures type 2 diabetes, then why are we going to say that that's not good for that person? Like, at the end of the day, like, and even talking about like what food choices are happening. I know I'm rambling and talking too much, but
no, you're good,
I have a friend, Mary, who's a coach, and she works with food addicts, and she works with her own issues of food addiction. Keto Mary 71 on Instagram. And Mary posted today because she showed her plate that was mostly bacon, cheese, and steak. And she's like, 90% of the food I've eaten during her ketogenic journey has been beef, bacon, and butter. And everyone says that's not what keto should be because they don't want that to be the image of it. She's like, but this is what I've eaten for 90% of my ketogenic journey. And all of her numbers are perfect. All of everything her doctor tests her for is perfect. And so if that works for someone, let it be what works for someone. The same way I feel, because I take issues sometimes when I see ketogenic influencers on Instagram who are posting desserts all the time. And 90% of the food recipes they're posting are desserts. And it makes it look like all they're eating is desserts all the time. And there are probably some people out there who can lose weight and be healthy on a ketogenic diet and do that, but I'm not one of the ones that can. And I think at the end of the day, again, it just comes back to finding what works for you and letting people be okay with doing what works for them. And if it's not something that works for you, no one on here, I know Ben's not saying this. We're not telling everyone that they have to go keto. If you were to press me and say, do I think every person on the planet could benefit if they did health-wise? I would probably say yes. But I don't think everyone can. And I don't think everyone can handle it from a mindset or psychological standpoint. So I would never tell people they have to.
No, 100%. And what's so interesting too is two things going off of that. Number one, so I've become connected, not like I wouldn't say friends, but like with Carnivore MD. And that's always the question for me. And like, okay, tell me the difference between a carnivore diet and keto. I would say they're basically the same thing. And a lot of the scientific benefits of carnivore is because they're in ketosis. Like, I feel like it's not about the meat itself. It's not about, it's because you're in a keto-based state, which is helping with your lower insulin levels, lower sugar levels, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily mean it's because of, well, you're eating the whole meats and blah, 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 blah. I don't think there's a good enough
Well, I think Ben could kind of walk us through that. He's lived on both sides of that spectrum, right? Carnivore and keto.
Yeah, I've jumped back and forth to different degrees of like adherence to both, right? I've done the keto ice creams, and then I've been the person that eliminated dairy and tried to eat beef liver, right? So like I've done all of these things, and I think that I would agree with David that like the majority of the benefit you're gonna get can be gotten from pretty much any diet, any ketogenic diet for you. Any diet that puts you in ketosis will get you at least 80% of the same benefits as carnivore. But then it goes back to how well formulated is your diet. So a lot of what Carnivore MD, what Paul preaches is like, well, you eat beef liver because vitamin A, vitamin B12, and he goes through all these things. So it goes back to the difference in, I guess I'm assuming for this podcast, we're talking about carnivore in a weight, or keto rather, in a weight loss context.
Not really, in a lifestyle in general.
It's just keto. Yeah, keto in general. I think it's because I think lifestyle is important too with it, because everyone has.
I don't look at keto as a diet. You know what I mean? I look at keto as a full blown lifestyle. You know,
and in a way it is, but I think that just like you can follow keto and eat ice creams and brownies all the time and barely maybe get 45, 50 grams of protein a day, you can also fall somewhere else in that spectrum where you're on the other end, where you're eating an abundance of protein, you're eating zero carbs, like we talked about earlier. Ketosis is always going to go back to carbohydrate restriction. And then the organ meats that he promotes, while that seems extreme for most people, it kind of covers all your bases in a nutritional sense. So like looking at like what they would measure your labs, right? You got to make sure you get enough vitamin A, enough vitamin C, you want to get iron. All these things that, especially if you're eating carnivore, may be concerning. That's where the organ meat things are coming in. But I guess to make this broad answer more specific, is like keto will get you most of those benefits. The biggest benefit to most diets is the things that they stop you from doing. Almost every successful diet is going to reduce or eliminate sugar and kind of encourage more positive eating habits, right? And then, so even if it's paleo, if it's vegan, right? If you're doing vegan and eating salads, that's probably still better than the standard American, what we think of as a standard American diet. So like it all kind of falls on a spectrum, but I think if you go keto, you're getting most of the benefit you would get from going carnivore. But it does kind of go back to what Gormy said. Like some people, if they do a more relaxed, say like ketogenic diet versus carnivore, then maybe they still struggle with that control over food, going back to our friend Mary Gormy. So like that works for her the best to control the issue that she has. And it goes back to, I'm not going to knock anyone for doing anything, right? But yeah, I would agree that carnivore is kind of an extreme approach to accomplish basically the same goal, but it does work for people who need like harder rules or stronger like boundaries for themselves.
See that? And I love that, because again, this is the classic to me, and this is why I shit on most of anyone, because this is the reality. The reality is we don't fucking know. We don't. Like nutritionists, you get these certain nutritionists who are like, well, the newest data shows vegan is just blah 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 LDL levels, and yeah. Again, none of these studies show astronomical data. They show inferences. They show maybe a little bit, but none of them have these like astronomical, like, oh, wow, if you go vegan, you drop your cardiovascular disease by 99.8%. No one does that. And so it's like, it's this classic of, I think one of the things that when you get into keto, when you get into any nutrition plan, are you primarily eating to fuel your body? Or are you primarily eating for taste and convenience? Doesn't mean you can't find tasteful, convenient things to fuel your body.
Right.
But this idea that this is where the intuitive eaters I'm going to just shit on. Because you tell David Roden, 410 pounds, just learn how to feel out your body. If you feel like you should eat a Snickers bar, it's okay to eat a Snickers bar. Shut the fuck up. Like David Roden would never stop eating Snickers bar. Actually, it would have been Reese's peanut butter cups. Same concept. If I would like, no, I literally in the depths of my weight loss, I didn't touch a Reese's peanut butter cup for probably 2 years. Once I got through it and I lost 150 pounds, then I was like, yeah, I'm going to have one. And I've calloused my brain to be able to control it. But this classic of like, you can't like build balance early. That's not necessarily true. Like some people need the massive restriction at the beginning and then they find their balance afterwards. Like that's,
and
I think
I mean, I kind of like to think in a way that that's essentially where I am, right? It's like, I am pushing towards, I guess, balance in a cultural sense though, because like I'll say this, I should have said it earlier when we were talking about it, but I was surprised that you guys asked me to do this because I recently, I guess, left keto, if you want to make it seem dramatic.
No.
But it was keto, I will say, was the single most powerful and sustainable weight management, both for losing weight and maintaining it, that I had ever done up to this point. And I would also recommend it to anybody who at least try it, right? If you're trying to lose weight and you have a problem controlling yourself, especially, at least just try it, because that really worked for me. And it just helped me get to the before stage of what David's talking about, where like you go through further restriction, or you restrict it down to a baseline and then you build it back up.
Yeah.
Because I get like old me, I always think about it like that. And it's like, no, he was never going to be able to just make it work. I said it earlier, but he was never going to be able to have one donut, right? So I'm all about keto for doing exactly what David just said, which is kind of giving you a new baseline, and then you just see how far you can go from that. And if that's not at all for some people, that's also fine, because it should be more about your goals and the results that you want than like whatever dietary approach you're following, in my opinion.
So let's kind of pivot this conversation really quick.
There's one more thing I want to add just to that, which is like, this is like going off of like the common misconceptions like I wanted to kind of hit on, which is at the end of the day, no matter, like, there's a hierarchy to macros. Like people will say otherwise, but there's a hierarchy of macros. Number one is protein. Protein is by far the most essential macro. Why? Because there's only certain metabolic things it can do. Build muscle. There's only certain metabolic things that need the amino acids to get done. Like that you just have to. Number two, most important thing is fats. Like there are fat is needed. The lipids are needed for different endocrine function, testosterone, these certain things that need lipids. Carbs are basically just energy. That's all it's basically used for. So at the end of the day, protein's the most important. Fats are the second most important, and carbs are the least important of the body. Why? Because all three can be used for energy, people. Fats can be used for energy, protein can be used for energy, carbs can be used for energy. but only certain things can be done the opposite direction. And so that's why I always convey like protein and fats are still the most important and carbs the least, because you can build energy through all three platforms, all three macros. You can't do certain things without protein and fats. That's like the misconception a lot of people get too. I did see Gormy kind of shake a little bit. Do you have a little pushback on that?
No, I think using protein for energy is a very inefficient process.
Oh, 100%. It is inefficient.
There's so much more science there to, like in terms of like going deep on that. Like
no, 100%. But
my
whole thing is just the idea that carbs, this idea that you need carbs for
energy.
Yeah,
no, you're completely on track with that.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, you could negotiate like protein and fat and swap them, but just the idea of carbs, the least important of the three. They are.
Well, I mean, then we could dive into like gluconeogenesis and the body creating glucose when it needs it, from other factors, that don't involve actually eating carbs. So
exactly. What were you about to say, John?
So no, I wanted to pivot the conversation more, because we have our notes, right, David? So I'm kind of just hitting this in the baseline of our notes. So I kind of wanted to pivot the conversation to, so start with a clean slate. You're not talking to me and David. You're talking to somebody who basically debating on starting this keto journey. They have no idea what it is. Kind of give everyone at home listening the broad strokes of the how-to of introducing yourself to keto and, the building blocks of what, how to build that lifestyle. Ben, we'll start with you.
With me?
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think that it's important to acclimate. I guess the first thing you have to do with anything is like you make the decision and the commitment. So if you go into it saying this isn't going to work, this is going to be hard, this is going to be restrictive, then you're kind of not giving it a fair shake, right?
Right.
Beyond that, I'm a fan of like acclimating to the food choice. So while I'll say that in terms of weight loss and health to a degree, but like calories are probably your most important thing, right? But you need to, I think, get used to eating that way, go through, people talk about keto flu and all these things, but like there is, no matter how extreme or minor it is, there's going to be a period where you're adapting to eating a different way and really just not having carbohydrates, right? That's what you're adapting to. So I'm a fan of like if you've never done it before, I do like kind of the cliche approach that you see online of like just eat keto foods, so to speak, or just track only a carbohydrate number, say stay within 40 grams of total carbs, and then let fat and protein fall wherever they end up as you get used to the food choices you have eating without carbohydrates, right? Right. And then a couple weeks in, then that's when we're going to need to shift focus more towards calories and macros and things that will matter to influence your goals. So even if it's gaining weight, macros and calories are still important, right? Just in the other direction from what people are used to. So like, if you're going to go keto, I think it's important to adjust to the diet itself first. So just get used to the food choices you have, what meals in theory should look like. What things are very hard for you to eat when you're doing this, and then you start to drill down deeper on individual macro levels and your overall calories and things like that.
Cool. Gormy, and you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. Like, I really think what it's about is getting used to understand. Like, I think one of the first things, especially like someone coming from a standard American diet, like the first thing that everyone needs to get used to is what are the different words for sugar that get put on our labels. Or I think educating yourself that there are like currently, like, I believe it's 90 at this point words for sugar that the FDA allows people to put on a label for sugar. And those are put there to make you not realize there's sugar added to your food. So I think learning to read labels and realize what actually makes up your food is really important. I think for someone to start, I think it's that idea that you get them to, like Ben said, like, I honestly think focusing on counting carbs initially and eating enough fat and protein to satiation is a good place to start if you're transitioning, because if you hit a point where you're hungry, eat more fat and protein and allow yourself to kind of like experience that for a week or two as your body kind of gets adapted. I think also one of the biggest things for people to understand is really to dive deep into food, like dive deep into what it actually is in your food. So realize, like, and again, Ben and I are fans of Matt Vincent, so we'll throw his name around a lot. But one of the things that he talked about for a long time was he would eat anything that was one ingredient. If you could identify something as single ingredient food, then it could go on your plate. And I think getting used to that idea of moving away from processed foods and moving toward food in its more natural state is really something that just helps you be able to figure out how you should start building your plate, how you should start putting that together. The other tip, I say to people, like if they're starting out and they're just counting their carbs and they're not tracking their protein and their fat, and they hit a point where they're really hungry, eat more fat. Don't be afraid to use fat as that kind of lever that's helping you with your hunger as you're getting into it. I think it's this idea, and Ben started to talk about, keto flu and kind of that adaptation piece. The other thing that I don't think a lot of people think about when they're starting a ketogenic diet is we hold water on our bodies so that we can process carbohydrates when we're eating them. And as soon as you start eating ketogenically, your body starts to flush that water out. It's why you get that dramatic weight gain initially, and not weight gain, weight loss initially, and everyone loves it, and it's all very exciting for people. But what comes along with that can be headaches and muscle aches and the quote unquote keto flu, because as your body is losing water, you're not holding water as efficiently, and you're also flushing out electrolytes. So supplementing, increasing the amount of sodium that you're taking in, looking at taking in some potassium and some magnesium can be things that really help. And I know for me, I never experienced a keto flu period at all because someone talked to me about electrolytes very early on in what I was doing. And so I do that now with every person I'm working with. And, I work in a store now that's selling keto products. And when people come in and they say it's week 1 and okay, they're feeling a little crappy the first couple of days, I'm like, you need to up your water intake and you need to get your electrolytes. Plain and simply, even if it's just adding more salt to your food, because what we don't realize is the problem with salt in food usually comes from the fact that food is so highly processed that they pack it full of salt.
Right.
So when you go into like more of a whole foods based ketogenic way of eating, you're getting less salt naturally. You're taking in a lot less sodium, and so your body's flushing out more, and you're not taking it in. So if you have that little bit of a headache forming or something along those lines, throw a quarter teaspoon of salt into a 20-ounce bottle of water and knock that back, and it usually goes away really quickly. Like it's this idea of thinking about nutrients and the way those micronutrients can help with how you're approaching things in general. And really, and this is the problem, because that's where people start talking about like keto. I've had clients come to me and say, I want to go keto because my neighbor did it and they said they were never hungry again in their life. And it's not true that you're never hungry again in your life. Like, I think that's so ridiculous. We're in a weight loss space because we're getting ourselves into a caloric deficit. Mm-hmm. As human beings, we've moved away from the idea that hunger can be a good thing. Hunger kept us alive for generations. Like, it was being hungry that caused society to develop, because people realized that when they worked together, they could get food easier. They could hunt in packs. Like, hunger is a driving force in ourselves. And we've come to this place for some reason where we want to eliminate it. So I think also talking to people about realizing that sometimes you're going to be hungry, and it's eating a ketogenic way of food can help you realize the difference between your head hunger and your body hunger, because you start to kind of take away that insulin roller coaster that eating carbohydrates causes. But that's not really the answer to the question you were asking. Like, just
no.
that idea of getting started, like, I would say, like, find a resource, find a good resource. Like, there's a great food list on dietdoctor.com. I'll throw a plug in for the ketoroad.com. We have a great page called What is Keto, where we list kind of like a basic list of foods to think about when you're going keto. Mm-hmm. Find a list like that and start building some meals off of those lists. Start realizing what vegetables have more carbs and have less carbs, and realize that most likely if you're eating a vegetable that is green and grown above ground, you're probably going to be pretty much in the clear when it comes to eating it. Like, mm-hmm. it's those root vegetables and those things that grow underground that cause more problems. The more colorful something is, the more likely it's going to have sugar, all of that. Like, start to learn. So I'll be plain and simple and I'll stop rambling. Basically, start to educate yourself about food. Learn how to track food. Even if you're not going to be tracking it tightly, learn how to understand what the basic building blocks of food are. I see so many people who come into the keto space and have never heard the word macros before in their life. So mm-hmm. learn what protein is, learn what carbs are, learn what fat is. And then you can start to tweak that. Like Ben was saying, like, as you get into it, you can start thinking about what are some more ideal choices. Like, when I work with someone and they're like, I heard eating mayo is bad for me because of the oil that it's made with. And I'm like, well, if having a little bit of mayo with your chicken right now is helping you get through the day as we transition you to your new macros, stick eating that mayo. We'll talk about avocado oil mayo soon. We'll talk about finding other sources soon. But understand that, we're helping you do this in stages. You don't have to be 100% day one. You don't have to be perfect on the first day. Just don't like, again, it just goes back to that idea of don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid to dive into it. And ask people questions and research, and don't, and I'll throw one more caveat out there. If a product has keto on the label, don't just accept that as being something you can take and shove in your face. Still read the label, still read what's in it. Look at portion sizes and realize no matter what weight, if weight loss is your goal, you're going to have to eat less calories than you're using every day. That's something you're going to have to do. And it's just that for a lot of us, keto helps us do that. And that's the thing the point I try to make the most to people is that when I've tried other diets, I've done other ways of, like, I get DMs all the time, or I used to when I had a bigger Instagram account, of people telling me that, I know, right?
Free Gormy.
But people telling me, like, you could have done, like, and it even happens now on Twitter. I post a transformation picture, and I'm going to get I haven't opened Twitter up since I posted this morning, but there's going to be someone that replied and said, you could have done the same thing, just counting calories. And you know what? I could have.
But I didn't.
It would have driven me insane. Yeah. There's all these different tools out there to help you lose weight, and whichever one helps you get into a caloric deficit, let that be the one that you use.
I love
that said.
Yeah.
That said, like Ben said this, and I think not enough people realize this, because there's so many influencers in the ketogenic space that love to talk about the fact that they just eat without restriction and they eat intuitively and they never gain it. They've lost all the weight.
I hate that fucking
keeping it off
saying right
perfectly. Now. But let's realize most of these people were never morbidly obese to begin with. And I hate to say that, but it's true. They were not.
So true.
And they don't understand what a disordered relationship with food can really be like. And yes, there are tons of thin people out there that have trouble with food. But I'm going to tell you that if you're 200 pounds overweight, your relationship with food is going to be different than someone who is just 20 pounds overweight.
Way different.
And so I went from 480 to 290. I went down from 480 to 280. And I put on 15 pounds eating ketogenic. I was not eating more than 20 grams of carbs a day. And I was putting weight on because my food addiction and my compulsion to eat was stronger than ketogenic macros, and so I had to find a way to work on that. And I think that's the thing to realize at the end of the day is no way of eating is going to give you magic release from all of these other issues you deal with. You need to find ways to use these tools to help you so that you can work on those other things. And that's the greatest gift that keto has given me, is the strength to be able to work on my addiction to food in other ways beyond just what goes on my plate.
Drop the fucking mic. Boom. You couldn't have asked for a better response.
No,
go ahead.
You go. Actually,
I was going to pivot the conversation again.
I was pretty close to it. No, but I think that is just the idea of, I find it hysterical when there's a couple different concepts. Number one, just the idea that someone doing a different program who gets the same result is somehow, why didn't you do this way? Shut the fuck up.
Oh yeah.
Just shut the fuck up. Like, Gormy, this is our podcast. We cuss on here.
Oh yeah.
Gormy,
I curse on Gormy's podcast all the time.
But like, it's just hysterical to me. That's this person's ego talking. Like, if they're getting the results now, as long as they're not bashing someone else. What gets me is like when keto people are shitting on vegan people. Let them do their thing. Now, if they start coming back at you, then yeah, obviously I'm gonna play that angle. It's like I had a friend of mine who started jabbing at me about veganism, and I'm like, hey, if you want to go here, I'm willing to go there. But if you're going to go there, you better come correct, because I'm gonna throw some data out there it's going to spin you in circles. You live your life, go do it. I'll live mine. Great. As soon as you start attacking me based upon your belief system, be ready. That's fine. Just be ready. I'm going to attack back then. Like, that's how this is going to work.
Right.
I just find that hysterical how people think this is some kind of a one size fits all plan.
Well, that's what losing weight is, David.
Yeah.
One size fits all.
It's one size fits all. Everything's fine.
Well, the best part about one size fits all, throwing everything under this banner of keto, is that you can do, we talked about carnivore MD and a carnivore diet, but then you can technically also follow a vegetarian ketogenic diet, because it goes back to whatever your body's in, right? So lumping groups together, or vegans who eat Oreos versus eating salads, right? So like grouping everyone together is always going to be, and this can go beyond diet if you want, but it's always going to be
that's racist.
Problematic, right? To generalize like that.
Oh, 100%. And then the whole thing I was going to say off of that is just like getting to this realization, people, that you have to start. The only way this is going to sustain, the only way you're going to live the healthiest and happiest life you can through lifestyle, is come to the realization you have to be educated. You can't just like, oh, fucking throw shit against a wall and hopefully it just sticks.
Yeah, that hasn't worked for you up to this point. So.
Yeah, it's like taking a credit card that you don't know what the limit's on and then going to a car dealership and saying, I want that one.
That one, yeah.
And you're like, well, what's your credit? How much can you afford? Do you even know what this car costs? Do you know what kind of gas it takes? Do you know what insurance is going to happen? You don't know anything. And you think your life's just going to somehow work out. Like, that's just not how it's going to work. Right. And so that's where, if keto is the route you go, you can't just willy-nilly it. You have to be educated on the do's, the don'ts.
And what I like to also tell people is, like, if you're getting into this fear of losing weight, try to find that person, if you want to call them a role model, whatever you want to call them, who's kind of started in a similar position as you. Like, don't go and follow Tom, who fucking did, Weight Watchers. He only needed to lose 15 to 20 pounds, and you need to lose 150 to 175 pounds. Tom is going to have a whole different experience than, you're ever going to have. Like Gormy was saying before, the food relationship is going to be totally different. Your relationship with food is not anywhere near where a regular Tom, Joe, Bill, Bob is at. So you need to find somebody, no matter what path you choose to go on, what lifestyle you want to do, who's starting somewhere, close to you. Also, I would like to pivot the conversation. Is that cool with everybody? Is everyone good where we're
Fire
at right now? Yeah, maybe. Okay, cool. I think this is going to be one of the more fun portions of the.
I know where this is going.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
maybe. I do. No, actually, I wanted to talk about common misconceptions with keto.
Oh.
I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but what are some of, like, you guys have to get the most wild DMs about keto and, people's ideas behind keto. And, my mom told me this, or my cousin who did keto told me, like, what are some of the most common misconceptions that you guys get in your DMs that you have to set the story straight when it comes to keto? Yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
I'll start. Here's one that I've been getting a lot the past 2 weeks, that exogenous ketones are required. Hi, prove it.
Oh, drives me nuts.
Yeah. So this idea that you need exogenous ketones to get back into ketosis quicker, or it helps you with a cheat meal and all this bullshit. Exogenous ketones have a place.
They do.
They have a place when it comes to performance and energy and mental focus, and they can do some great things for people. But the idea that you need them for weight loss, and anyone who tells you that you need them for weight loss and then tries to sell you them at 500 times the price you would pay if you were just to buy the ingredients that's in the packet yourself.
So what is this for people that don't understand?
I've already said it. I've said the word "prove it" ketones several times.
Oh, I hear you.
I have friends that sell them who are going to get very mad at me saying this. I think there are people that use them. I know some people, like my friends, Strongman Way and Nat, use them and use them properly. There's uses for these things, and there are people that, and like they sell them above the board. But it's like anything. Like, I know people that have used Herbalife to extreme success and have done some great things with it. But then it's when it comes over into that dark side of it becoming more about marketing and less about the actual product. But I think, to back off bashing anyone, I'll just go back to this idea that exogenous ketones are not needed if weight loss is your goal with the ketogenic diet. You should be looking to create an increased level of ketones in your body through the food you're eating, not through creating a false reading. Because
that's what I was about to say. I've done prove it.
Right,
I've been on exogenous ketones.
I could show up as diabetic by eating 4 candy bars and testing my blood sugar. Like, I could show up as having a dangerous level of blood sugar by doing that. Like, I think the idea is that, realize that products don't get us where we need to be. Mm-hmm. It should really be, I think food is what you want to think about it. I think another giant misconception is that all keto people do all day is sit around dipping bacon in melted butter and eating that. And there probably are some people that do that, but a lot of us don't. There are a lot of us that eat plenty of vegetables every day and enjoy ourselves. It's not something that you just do. I'll throw, I'm on a roll with these misconceptions because I think we already talked about this, but the idea that calories don't count on keto is bullshit.
It's my favorite.
That's the biggest one that's out there. Yes, eating a ketogenic ketogenic macros, a ketogenic ratio is going to kill your hunger. And so you then naturally, for some people, go into a caloric deficit. And True. That's what that is. It's not that you can magically eat 50,000 calories a day on keto. And are there some people, I have friends that are in incredible shape and eat 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day, staying carnivore or staying strict keto Genetics. And don't gain an ounce. And they're amazing. But yes, that's a genetic thing. If I walk by, 5,000 calories, I gain 3 pounds. That's my genetics. So
Yeah,
understand that, it's not magic. Keto is not magic. I love the ketogenic diet. I love everything that's done for me. There is literally nothing magic about it. It's science. We're dealing with science, and whether you want to use that science to your benefit or not is up to you. But don't think that just because you all of a sudden, are eating high fat and cutting your carbs, that something magic is going to happen for you. It's still going to take some work. So there's mine.
So we've already, just like Gormy said, we've already touched on like the big ones, calories being probably the biggest for me. And touching on the exogenous ketone things is I'll have people, big misconception is that, especially for people who are testing their ketones, they treat it like an arcade game and they're trying to get the high score, right? Like they think that if they got a 2.8, if I can just push it over 3, then I'll really get to, and that is more, I always compare blood ketones to like the fuel gauge in your car. It tells you how much fuel is available at any given time, right? But it doesn't say how much you've used that day. It doesn't tell you how efficiently your car is running, right? It is just a measurement of if you have ketones in your system or not. So like you take the exogenous ketones and it puts you up to a 3.5. You're not necessarily losing weight or burning calories any faster than somebody who isn't taking the exogenous ketones, right? So, you can talk about where a good level to be was, but generally anything over 0.5 for your blood ketones is almost no different from being at 1.5, right? It's like it's a pass or fail thing, but a lot of people treat it like this high score game, and the two just don't relate. So that's a big one for me. And then the other one that I get a lot is people ask me how I eat so much protein. And I know that Gormy probably has, although we generally largely agree, he has a slightly different approach. But I've always liked a higher protein version. So if you look at that normal keto macro split that they put out there, where you're only at like 20% protein. Some people take it as low as 15. And again, not here to knock anybody who gets results anyway. But I've always liked more protein. And I think that in a general standpoint, taking keto out of it, most people are much more at risk of not getting enough protein than they are of eating too much of it. But there's this big fear around eating too much. So then you'll have like any of us, we'll have guys that are our size, John's size, and they'll be eating 95 grams of protein a day. And it's like, I get that you went high fat, right? Your carbs are really low, but you still need to be mindful of protein and stop being afraid of it. There's this big fear stigma with protein that to me is like unwarranted a little bit.
Yeah,
so that's probably the one I get the most.
Yeah, I don't understand this fear behind protein.
Well, it's this idea that there is people who don't have a basic understanding of what gluconeogenesis is. They hear this idea that the body can turn protein into sugar when needed, and don't understand that it's a demand-driven process. It's one that the body uses when it needs it, not constantly. So
they
there
ignore
are some
that
people
when
that
needed
will,
part.
right. So there's this idea that people think that if you eat an extra steak, you're eating a cupcake. That steak turns into chocolate cake in your body, and I've seen people say that, and it's like, it's bullshit. That's not really the way that it works.
It's pretty
completely
brutal.
They just don't have it's this idea that I think happens in all levels, in social media space. We find one little tidbit of information and we run with it as the gospel truth. It's also the idea of like the insulin response being the primary driver to people thinking that's the primary thing behind weight loss, but it's almost like what I like to tell people is like, there's all of these factors involved. There isn't just one major thing that is involved with what's causing your body to lose weight or causing your body to gain weight. Realize that it can be a multifaceted process. And don't just glom onto one train and put all your eggs in one basket. Realize that you need to kind of pay attention to like the broader spectrum of what you're dealing with. I was going to say there was another one that misconception that came up with me, and now I'm going to blank.
Yeah, I got one.
That was pissing me off. But go ahead.
The big one that I like, it blows my mind because I had a nutritionist tell me this, and I'm like, you're wrong. And the misconception that ketosis and ketoacidosis are the same thing.
Oh yeah,
they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like this idea, like ketoacidosis is a diabetic issue most of the time, where basically since your insulin is so low and your sugar levels go through the roof, ketones start to develop in the blood to a point where it's way above the metabolic norm of ketosis. We're talking like ketones of 8, 10, 12, 15, and it acidifies the blood, and then you can die from that. But we're talking like if you're just a normal ketosis, I do a 5-day fast and my ketones hit 3.5 tops because your body your body's healthy and it adapts it and controls it correctly. And this idea that going into ketosis can make you go ketoacidosis, it's just bullshit. It's just not true. That one is always so funny to me because I had to educate this one. Yeah. That was fun.
So, misconceptions behind us. What are some of your guys' favorite keto nutritional hacks, food hacks?
I'll go first with food hacks. Something that I'm going back to being a fan of a higher protein. But honestly, no matter what kind of macro split you want to do, I tend to be a fan of getting like leaner cuts of meat and then adding fat differently, right? Add some butter, add whatever. Just gives me more control over the numbers, and it helps me, especially early on, when you really start focusing on your numbers and you have specific macros you want to hit, going with a lean protein, especially that'll off the top take care of your protein versus eating a bunch of ribeye and realizing you need enough protein for the day, right? So have a sirloin and then add butter to get calorically and macro wise where you need to get. That's one that I've always liked.
I've never even thought of that.
The ones that I think of, like, obviously I can think of some fat hacks because that's something that, kind of like works a lot for me. But I think one of the bigger things that people don't think about is food volume. When you're eating a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, you're tending to eat foods that are really calorie dense. Fats and proteins tend to be really calorie dense. So size wise, it's not as much food volume going into your stomach. So I think of things like picking vegetables that are going to be higher in volume. So like raw greens, like baby arugula, baby spinach, things along those lines that are going to give you a lower carb hit, but it give you some intense volume. Like that clamshell that they sell at the supermarket of greens is usually 4 to 5 grams total of carbs. And once you open that thing up, it expands to be 10 times that size. And there's literally no way most people are going to eat that much salad when they're sitting down to eat a salad. So I think thinking about volume, another fun hack with volume is using shirataki or konjac noodles. They're very weird to work with. So if you do want to try them out, make sure you follow the rules. They need to be rinsed well and handled, but they can give you some volume for a low carb hit. I think thinking of volume, thinking of crunch is another thing that most people miss. I've had a couple clients recently say they're adapting to eating a ketogenic way of food, but they're missing crunch because when you cook vegetables, you tend to lose the crunch. So when we talked about, incorporating some raw vegetables, but then also things like pork rinds, cheese crisps, finding ways to add things that give you a little bit of that crunch that you're missing can be something that can be a great hack. As far as fat hacks, my biggest that I'm always talking to people about, and on some levels, people think I'm obsessed, is making homemade avocado oil mayonnaise. It takes 30 seconds and it's delicious and it's some well-controlled fat and you know what's going into it. There's no sugar added. There's no other kind of crap oils. You can have some control over it and you can flavor it a million different ways. The other hack I would say is seasonings. Use different spice blends, try different tastes. There's great companies out there selling many spice blends that don't have sugar added to them. Look for those, try different things. Don't be afraid to try new recipes. If you are missing a certain food, the other thing is Google that food with the word keto in front of it, and you're going to find 100 recipes for it. There are people out there that have done the work for you already. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Especially we're heading into the holidays. So if you're looking for a stuffing or a pie, or I've got some clients that are Jewish that were looking for specific foods, for the high holidays that they're missing. And, we're finding that those recipes exist, keto recipes exist. There's so many of them out there. And yes, you're going to have to listen to, probably read through someone's story of how, their grandmother carried the recipe on their back through the mountains and the snow and then brought it to them and they milked the cow and all that jazz before you get to the actual recipe. But they're out there, so do those things, at the end of the day, it's not hacks, it's choices. Like it's ways of figuring out things that work for you. When you find things that work for you, do the things that work. That's one more little one that I'll share that I love because this one shocked the hell out of me. If you're looking to up your fat, when you're scrambling eggs, each egg you're scrambling can handle a tablespoon of added butter cooked into it and will not get greasy. It'll make a nice fluffy egg as if you added water or milk or something along those lines. And it won't seep out fatty or anything along those lines. So you can really pump up the fat in your breakfast if you do that. That's just a little recipe hack. That's fun.
A very minor one that I always recommend to most clients, and this goes back to when Gormy and I were talking about electrolytes being important, especially initially. So I just say make sure that you salt every meal that you have. So like if you want to get into supplementation and tracking the exact amounts, that's one thing. But again, to kind of cover your bases, or a really simplistic approach to take care of this would just be to make sure that you incorporate or add salt to each meal that you have. I think that's going to be important early on and throughout.
Mm-hmm. I tell you what, one, too, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before, but depending on the person, again, do you need it to be in ketosis? No. But if you're ever the first time going into keto, taking exogenous ketones for the first, like, say, week as a buffer while your body's like transitioning, I have found for myself and for people I've worked with, like, it helps. It helps with like that transition. So again, you don't need it, but as a transition, I enjoy it because it just gives someone, because you also feel it. When you take exogenous ketones, you can feel what ketosis kind of feels like, with how ketones burn in the body different than carbs. And I've found it to be a strategy to help people deal with that transition.
This is going to be slightly contradictory and mostly ignorant, because I've never hardcore used exogenous ketones, but I always, when you look at, I guess in a number standpoint, just when you look at it, to me, when I look at it, the big benefit you're getting from exogenous ketones is 99% of the time an electrolyte thing anyway. Because what we talked about is when you when you're transitioning, you lose, right? You flushing, you're not taking in as much, so you're just constantly trickling down, and then some people get headaches and they get sick. But so when they take the ketones, they think that because the ketones are in there, then that is helping them in the adaptation. And in my limited experience and personal opinion, I think that any ketone that you take, BHBs, they're bound to a mineral, some kind of salt, potassium, whatever, and it's like super high dose. So it's hard to buy a supplement that has the same, say, sodium and potassium as an exogenous ketone supplement, even if it's branded as an electrolyte supplement. So just, it goes back like carnivore versus keto. I think if you take high amounts of electrolytes in that first week, you're going to get 80%, say, of the benefit of taking exogenous ketones. But I don't know that the exogenous ketones the juice isn't necessarily worth the squeeze, because you can supplement electrolytes far cheaper than you can supplement in the ketones.
Sure.
But that's an aside.
Sure. No, I agree. You don't need them.
No.
My thought,
I didn't think you were saying you need them. I was just saying, if you want the same benefit, less money, kind of go for
because I've worked with some people where like their body just fought tooth and nail not to go into ketosis. Like, and I had them. I was like, hey, work on your sodium, do this, do that, and they had a week and a half of hell. And I was like, you know what? Here's a couple ketones. Because at the time I was actually taking Prove It, and I was on exogenous ketones, and that like couple days helped them out immensely in the transition. And it could be the naivety of they were not telling me exactly what they're eating, and they're eating more carbs than what they said they were, and they were in that kind of buffer range.
Right.
But it definitely, from my personal experience, it definitely helped.
Time and place, right, for everything.
Mm-hmm. So
like, absolutely.
All right, so transitioning to the final here, we got a couple questions off of the Discord server. So question number 1 from Nicole here. It's a long one, so I'm going to explain. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but do you consider the way some people do keto to be detrimental to their health? ? Example that I see a lot on Instagram, people eating fast food burger patties, upwards of 4 to even 6 of them, with extra cheese, extra bacon, no bun, and a meal similar to that. Is keto sustainable for you for the long term / forever?
I'll answer that one. I think one of the things I think from my perspective is people need to realize that those burger patties have been tested, all those fast food restaurants. It's just beef. It may not be the most high quality beef, but it's just beef. People aren't eating that all the time. I don't think they're doing anything detrimental to their health by making that choice. I think that goes into the perception of cheese and bacon and things like that being quote unquote bad for us. And they're just not, depending on the quantities a person's eating. If they're eating that 4 times a day, they might be missing out on some nutrients. But I don't think they're doing anything directly harmful to their body when they're doing it. Yeah. And I know there was a second part to the question and I missed that. Sorry.
Well, results matter more than
my phone's about to die, so I'm dealing with battery issues.
Oh, you're good. And the second one was just basically the sustainability of long term. Like, can you do keto forever? Yeah,
yes.
100% you can.
Yeah.
You don't
have
to.
Question to you.
Keto was the easiest. Like I said earlier, it's like the easiest time I ever had adhering and sustaining a diet. And if it wasn't for my own, I think, curiosity and angst, for lack of a better term, like I could eat keto for the rest of my life. And if this little potato experiment of mine backfires, then I feel very safe and comfortable knowing that I have that to fall back on, and I could literally just ride that out forever. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then here's another one from Donna. This is another one we kind of talked about, but portion control. Should you count calories with keto? A lot of people, including myself, started out that it's a free for all, and it's not. Atkins mentality for years, which is in quotations. If Gormy can get blah blah blah. If she even said Gormy. If Gormy can go into that, that'd be great. So
they often do.
Yeah.
They often do.
but it's
not Instagram.
Not
Instagram said nope.
If anyone doesn't realize this yet,
join me on Parlor.
Oh God, I was waiting for that. I've waited the whole how long have we been on now? An hour and a half. I've waited for the Parlor joke to hit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, portion control calories. Obviously, we've kind of talked about it, but you want to hammer that?
No, I think you should. I think it's something where, I think if you can just adapt a ketogenic way of eating and you're finding that you're hitting your goals, you're losing weight at a pace that you want to lose weight at it and you're feeling good, fantastic. If you find that you're not, or you're starting to put weight on, or you're stalled, track your macros. Start working on doing some tighter tracking. I think everyone can benefit from learning about what portions should look like and what amounts look like and things along those lines. But I do think, especially if you're someone who struggles with a food addiction or with a disordered relationship with food, sometimes that tracking can help you understand what your plate should look like. And so you can understand that it's a tool that you can use when you need it, the same way that eating intuitively can be a tool that you use when you need it. But I do think, a lot of people that struggle with keto and say keto doesn't work, it's because they were overeating and not realizing that they needed a little more help in terms of doing some of that tracking.
Truth.
Yeah. I have almost nothing, basically nothing to add to that. It's dead on, because it's like calories are going to matter. But if you happen to be one of those people where you start eating keto and all of a sudden you're unintentionally restricting calories, then keep doing it, right? But like Gormy said, if you stall out for a couple of weeks or you start gaining some weight, maybe it's time to take things a little more serious. But at a certain point, for most of us, that's going to be unavoidable. And I do think that it's an important experience to have, tracking and learn. I can't tell you how many times people are like, oh, I can't believe that that's what 8 ounces look like. I thought it was much, much more,
I would also throw in there that unless you're amazing at eyeballing amounts of vegetables and things along those lines, you're probably not really eating keto if you're not tracking, because you're probably overeating on carbs unintentionally. So
100%.
It's a good idea to do some tracking of those carbs, at least to start, even if it's just the carbs that you track, so that you get an idea of what those should look like. Because let's be honest, like even for me, like I love Brussels sprouts, but if I ate the amount of Brussels sprouts that I like to eat, I would probably be eating 50 to 60 grams of carbs of Brussels sprouts just on my plate with a steak.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that you have to pay attention to and realize that if that helps you with portion control, do that.
That's like actually step one for me. Like when I work with anyone, the 2 steps nutritionally that I do is number 1, hydration. So like getting them to push their water to close to a gallon a day. And then number 2 is getting a food scale and weighing out your food so you know actually what you're eating. You break mysticism. Like the classic, like, well, you have no idea what you're eating until you weigh it and you actually scale it out and you actually know what you're doing. You have no idea what you're actually eating. Right. Oh, well, I had a steak. Well, you actually had a 19-ounce steak, not a 6-ounce steak. Like, well, but I don't understand. Put those calories in, see what you're actually eating here. Right. And so that at least it breaks mysticism. Like you do have to wait. You have to weigh your food forever? No. But you have to come to the realization of what you're actually putting in your body. And so that's where that comes into play.
You got any more questions on the Discord?
Those are the 2 big ones. A couple, like honestly, most of them we hit on. So we're just gonna leave it there.
Hey, but a shout out to Donna. Hey, Donna.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail.
He'll Venmo you after this is over.
All right, fellas. Well, I think that we're gonna wrap this bad boy up right now.
We hammered keto pretty well, boys and girls.
I do. I really do. I want to thank you guys for hopping on the first ever roundtable discussion. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I know that we both did. I think that we all learned a little bit something today. I did. If for those that didn't notice, I was a bit quiet tonight. I learned a couple of things, which is, I know everything in the world. So,
science.
Fuck. If you guys need any help with keto, feel free to reach out to both these fine gentlemen. I know that they will help you. I know that because Gormy actually charges for his help and Ben doesn't. So if that is your option, there you go.
Ben charges too. Who are you kidding?
Yeah,
Ben,
I was
Ben's a
going to
coach.
put a disclaimer. That's false. You can edit
Yeah.
this out, but I'm correcting it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. Well, I thought maybe
charges.
because you're eating potatoes now, you're not doing it.
No, the help is no less valuable. Do as I say, not as I do, you know?
Exactly.
All right. On that note, hopefully by the time this comes out, Gormy still has an Instagram that's yet to be known. You can follow him at Gormy Goes Keto. There's no more underscores in that, which is really sad. You can follow Ben at PrimalBro. You can listen to the Fat Guy Forum. You can listen to the Primal Broadcast. You can listen to ALG because you're already doing that. You can join the ALG Discord. I think that's it. Did I hit everyone's thing, David?
And you need to just be a fucking champion.
All right. Stay beautiful.
Stop being a victim. Triumph over your life, boys and girls.
Stay beautiful. Stay sexy.
Do it to them.
Kettles.